Hi, my name's Alyssa. I am the host of Stories and Spoilers, a podcast, and I am here with a familiar friend, a fae-like, amazing, spicy goddess who is just wonderful and full of romantasy. May you reintroduce yourself? I'm sure the listeners are familiar with you.
That is probably the best introduction I've ever gotten, and I don't think I can ever beat that. But hi, my name is Calissa,
Mm.
and I'm the host of Busy Reading Romantasy podcast.
Yes, I love your podcast because for someone who like fantasy, I have to kind of return to it. You make
Mhm.
it so enchanting and you have so many recommendations and like fun hosts and like guests who come on that it's just always so fresh. And
Thank
fantasy never
you.
gets stale with you. Like you always have a new
Thank you.
like plot to share.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there, and I like finding
Mhm.
the give me the new stuff, like something I've never encountered before. I want to be intrigued.
One of my favorite episodes you did was it wasn't fantasy, but it was a dark romance, and it was you did
Mm,
Butcher and Blackbird and you did Leather and Lark. I really, really want to read Leather and Lark because I loved Butcher and Blackbird.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I feel bad for y'all out here who eat vanilla ice cream, the real kind. I have a dairy allergy, so that
Oh,
scene in that book actually did not hit me that hard because I'm a
yeah.
cashew girly all the way. That's the only nut I'm eating, so it's very, it's very. I'm not in danger here. You know that meme where people
You're
say like
good.
you're in danger, and it's like, who are you talking to right now? That was me in
Not
that book. I
me.
was like,
Yeah.
I'm actually not in danger. Like, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
enjoy the
Yeah.
red lights from here, the red flags
Yeah.
from here. I will appreciate them from here.
There you go. There you go.
One of my favorite episodes that we recorded as well was one when we were talking about like spicy books and like genres of spice and smut, and we were talking about how like if spice is a river, we're just gonna like hop into the darkness together. Like, if you ever seen it, where like Pennywise grabs him and he like takes that
Yeah.
little boy underground, it's super terrifying. You and I are
Hmm.
like throwing ourselves into the darkness.
We are. We are.
He's a
Okay, so
Skarsgård. We throw
as
ourselves into the darkness.
as of recording this, our episode for my channel is coming out tomorrow. So by the time this will be out, it'll be out already. And I have a reel and I'm so excited for you to see it because I maybe did some like super amateur editing. I'm
Yes.
so
We were,
excited.
yes, if you go on to Busy Reading Romantasy, you're going to hear that episode. It was one of my favorite episodes to record this year. It is not on my
Yay!
page, but it is on
Yeah,
yours. And it
it
is
is.
so fun. And it is so, it reminds me a lot of the girls from Shut Up. It's like Shut Up and like Listen, but it was like Smut Up and Listen.
Yes. Hmm.
And their humor, if I'm having the worst day in the world, their episodes always bring me so much like levity. Just like they just so bubbly and wonderful, and they bring so much joy to like reading smut. And like that episode for me was our version.
Yes.
Like our
Yes.
our like tip the hat. Like I see you girls, if we're like smutty cowboys, like we're crossing paths in our little My Little Pony sexy journey, if you will. Like
Yeah.
we're just like cute, like fictional cowgirls just finding our way in this
Yeah.
literary world. It's
There you
great.
go. There you go.
That is
Last
my
time we were
metaphor.
like in the ocean, now we're cows. I love this. I
We were
can't wait
in
to
the
see where
ocean.
we'll go
We're on an
next.
odyssey. We are on an
Yeah.
odyssey.
Mm.
Speaking of bookish journeys, what are you currently reading? I'm actually really curious.
So I am currently reading Belladonna by Adeline Grace, and I've been dragging my feet on it for a little bit. No reason to the book. I'm so intrigued by the book and excited
Okay.
to continue onto it. But I also, just because it's December and it's like getting to the end of the year, I'm also reading The 48 Laws of Power
Ooh.
by Robert Greene. He also does The Art of Seduction. I'm like halfway through The Art of Seduction. It's like textbook size, but there's some like interesting stuff. I don't, it's you kind of pick and choose. Some of it's very like harsh, but you can kind of pick and choose the little nuggets that you want to bring into your life. So those are the two that I'm doing right now.
Wow, those are from what I understand about Belladonna, because I actually got gifted a copy of from a friend for my birthday. I have not
Yeah.
yet read it, but I have seen a lot of people making edits and kind of making like bookish collages, which are like photos of what they imagine the characters to be and the vibes and the aesthetic, if you will,
Hmm.
of they compared it a lot to Dickinson because
Hmm.
there's an element of like death being an individual and like kind of there's a murder mystery. There's
Hmm.
someone that's linked to poison, but like it doesn't like there's also being revived. Like I don't want to
Yeah.
spoil it too much, but from
Yeah.
what I understand, from the what the girlies and the folks have said, that is very much the vibe, very like
Oh
gothic.
yeah.
Also the murder mystery with the dark romance with the literal personification of death.
Hmm.
is interesting. Is it familiar?
Yes.
Well,
Oh my gosh.
yes.
I was about to say the anytime death is like it's not a person per se, but
No.
like personified
Yes.
to give death a personality. And
Hmm.
I'm like, yes, so we're in love.
I mean,
I
like,
won't
if
judge.
ooh, I mean,
Tell
I'm
me
not gonna.
more.
I mean, we all kind of have to go, right? Like we all have to. we
Yeah,
we
yeah,
we all have to go, right? Like,
yeah.
I think it's more so. I imagine Ben Barnes, Prince Caspian,
Mhm.
the Darkling, from
Yes.
Shadow and Bone. For
Yes.
the folks who know, you
Yeah.
know. I imagine, yeah, I imagine Ben Barnes. Also, he's a singer. Like that man is literally like written by a female author. He's a real person, but like he could be cast for a contemporary romance. He could be the personification of death. Like the line where he says like, "Fine, make me your villain." I want that in like every romance if possible. Some of these main characters do not have to be like fluffy golden retriever people. I'm okay
Mhm.
with them just being dark. Just be dark.
Yeah,
Come on.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
why? Why? You don't need a silver lining. It just gets in the
No,
way. Like I don't
absolutely.
we don't need
I
it.
I love the
Uh,
darkness. Let's hang out there.
we were in the ocean on a smutty odyssey. Now we're cowboys, cowgirls, cowfolks, just,
Mhm.
you know, on a different journey. Speaking of darkness, I'm currently reading a book. I grabbed the wrong book by accident, but I'm currently reading a book about. I've mentioned it a few times. I've been trying to read it, but work has been super busy. I'm going to finish it this week though, and it's Don't Forget Me by Eden Emery. Um, it is part of a series, but I have not read the other books. I honestly grabbed this for my birthday. It was the first time I'd ever seen a sapphic dark romance in a bookstore before. A lot of the sapphic books that I've seen in bookstores are a lot more light, contemporary, maybe slightly taboo, but I'd
Mhm.
never seen a dark romance in a bookstore before that was queer. So that was really exciting. And I immediately bought it from Steamy Lit here in Florida. And no regrets. It's sexy, it's dark, it has I don't know how to describe this. It has like mutual pining. It has a stalker who the main character knows who is stalking them because they ha previously had a spicy relationship and they left mysteriously, and the person they slept with is like obsessed with them, but the main character can't stop thinking about her either.
Mhm.
And her love interest was like the accountant pretty much for like a mafia group. She was the daughter of the like head guy, and she ends up running away from her family, taking all the money and kind of John Wicking it, and then going after the woman she's obsessed with and saying like, I'm out of the I'm not doing this anymore. And her dad is like, I'm gonna come get you, and she's like, mm, whoever you send, I'm going to unalive. So it's very much like she's literally John Wick, but she's
Yes.
in love with the professor at Stanford. She already graduated college, but she ends up going there as like a fake student, and she ends up trying to seduce the woman she was with. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and the story goes from there. It is so good. It sounds chaotic, but it's actually awesome. Like I'm having a good time. And it's not that
Yeah.
big. It's like I'm ashamed to say how long this has taken me to read. But for those who know, yeah, at the end of the year,
I
I
feel,
don't know what is with the end of the year, but it's
I
really
feel that.
hard to finish
I feel
books.
that.
Like,
Yeah.
is that just me? Like
No.
oh no, like it's hard out here. I also love how you're reading a fantasy, but you're also reading a nonfiction because I'm actually doing the same thing.
Ooh.
Um, I'm reading a book called Disability Intimacy: Essays on Love, Care, and Desire, edited by Alice Wong. I have it on Libby for it's very hard to see, but I have it on Libby. And we love Libby because for girlies on a budget and for the library card, it's fantastic. But it's a series of essays from people who have disabilities discussing intimacy, romance, sex work, being a parent, the importance of closeness, what that looks like in the disability community. And there's poems, and it's so good. And it's read by the authors of each essay,
Oh wow.
which is
I love
great.
that.
It's
Yeah.
really good. Like it might be one of my like dark horses of the year. I didn't go out looking for it, but I wanted to read more books about intimacy and communication, especially
Hmm.
in marginalized communities, and I found this and it's only it's not that many hours. It's not like 20 hours. It has to be at least like 8, but it's not that
Mhm.
bad. And you can hop
Okay.
from essay to essay. You don't have to read it in chronological order,
Gotcha.
which is
Oh,
so
I like
good.
that.
Which is
Yeah.
so good. Yes, so I will link that below. But yeah, we got a dark romance on one side, and then we've got a nonfiction girly on the other.
Hmm.
And there's an author from that book who wrote a graphic novel series I'm a huge fan of. Which where did I put it? I might have given it to my girlfriend really quick. But it is this graphic novel series called Bingo Love, which is semi autobiographical a little bit, but the author said that the story of Bingo Love is two women who were in school together, who as like teenagers had a kiss and like they would do bingo together, and then someone saw them and took one of the girls away to like kind of live with a relative and separated them. There's a little bit of homophobia, and then years later you get to see the kind of passage of time, and the main character, she gets married to a man and she has children and she has a career and she's getting older. But she's never forgotten about her first love, and it's insinuated that she's closeted. And one day she ends up back at that church and she's playing bingo and her daughter is there, and she sees her first love from across the room. Her first love's back in town, and they're both older now, and they see each other and they kiss. It's like no time has gone by. And it's modern day. And then the daughter's upset and all that, and you kind of see how the family's affected, and it's a graphic novel and it's very short. But you get to see kind of, is there still time? How is the family affected? Sexuality really is a spectrum. There's secrets, there's growth, there's healing, there's love, and then there's representation for older adults who find love again, or return to a love. And it's I love stories with like people from different ages, races, sexuality, and just like I like low stakes, but sometimes I do like stories where like there is a little bit of like a realistic element where like you have to explain certain things or you have to consider other people's
Mhm.
feelings. Like, I don't know. Sometimes that's nice. Do you have any kind of books that have made you feel that way where you're like, man, like this had layers, like there were things going on.
Yeah, I know we talked about this in the episode that we had just filmed for my channel when it came to slow burns of like kind of needing that extra layer of like it can't just be an easy mm, kind of non-barrier, like something that's
Yeah.
easily like whatever. I like those deeper layers that you really kind of feel like you have to work for it. And it's like, oh, how is this gonna work out? Kind of thing. No specific title comes to mind right now,
Yeah, it's just a
but
feeling.
yeah, yeah,
It's definitely just a
absolutely.
feeling. I'm on a last episode of Stories and Spoilers, the podcast, an author, Evie Mitchell, so sweet, so amazing. She writes disability romance, diverse romance. She's based in Australia. Well, she's
Mhm,
so nice. One of my favorite independent authors. She references kind of like her books are like cupcakes because they're so sweet and short, and like people can really just enjoy them and kind of devour them. But
mhm,
she also discusses how like there's a heart to books and there's a heart to romance, and it's not just about like spice, even though spice is lovely and her books do have spice.
mhm.
It's more about like, why do you love this person? Why do you stick around? Like, what makes you really
Right.
want to be close to this character? And like, what's the dynamic? Like, what puts these two people together? Like, for a
Mhm,
lack of a better word, Butcher and Blackbird, what attracts them to each other
mhm,
outside of this thing they do together.
mhm.
Outside of lust, outside of the game of it all. You mentioned it in one of your episodes, which was so good. I have to applaud you for it. You mentioned a scene where a character kind of blows up, and
Mhm,
they're
mhm,
very vulnerable, and they kind of are a little bit unhinged in that moment, and there's just no filter. And
mhm,
the love interest has to make a decision if they're going to stick around or if they're going to kind of dip.
mhm.
And the decision they make impacts the entire story. And it may seem small, like, are you leaving? Are you staying? It's early enough where whichever you do, it may not hit like it, there's nothing really to build on, so it's not that
Right.
bad. But the way you talked about it, about like
Mhm,
that singular decision will lead the entire story,
mhm.
chef's kiss. So good. Like,
Thank you.
how, and
Yes.
that scene also hit me really hard. So I'm like, reader to
Yeah.
reader, what a great scene.
Yeah, I always feel like there is like an extra level of considerations, like when you were even talking about maybe racial differences
Mhm.
or age differences or just kind of themes that we don't see as often that aren't like don't maybe fall under kind of the societal norms.
Mhm.
There's so much more information that we tend to be missing, maybe things that we didn't even consider that can
Yeah.
be a factor culturally or there's so much. So I always like a situation where maybe it presents as one thing, and then once you get more information you're like, oh, like that's why maybe someone
Yeah.
acted a certain way, or there's always more.
I love that. I also feel like even with like short books, they can really surprise you in the way that they hit you really hard or certain characters may impact you very deeply,
Yes.
especially in fantasy. I think I'm going to start my 2025 with a fantasy. You've inspired me to kind of
Yeah.
explore it again. I want to read more books that are like linked to magic. I want to read more books about like witches. I think they're so interesting. And obviously like, the original witches that like swept me off my feet with like the dark themes, but also like the beautiful elements of it was practical magic.
Yeah.
Not the book, but the
Okay.
movie. There was something about that movie. It had like I don't know what is it
Hmm.
about that movie, but like books
Yeah.
of film adaptation, I'm okay with never reading that book because I'm so attached to the film.
Yeah.
I know that's
That's
like
fair.
blasphemy in the book community to say that, but like I'm so attached to the movie. For the first time in my life, I actually don't necessarily want to read the book. Yeah,
Fair.
which is tough. But you know, Sandra Bullock,
Yeah.
oh, oh, it's hard, you know? Nicole Kidman, like redheaded
Hmm.
Nicole Kidman.
Hmm.
Do you have any fantasies that you think about where you're like, yeah, that's the epitome of like magic, maybe a little darkness, maybe a little spiciness. Like,
Oh.
you know, when you think about it, you're like, ah, feels good to be home. Like this is the one. This is my
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. Let me see.
I always love your
As
bookshelf whenever I see it. I always look
Oh,
at the
thank
skull
you.
with the snake and like all the books and the candles.
Yeah. Um, the few that stand out to me for different reasons, the Ugly series by Scott Westerfield, not necessarily
Mm.
magic, but like it's that kind of preteen dystopian, powerful main character changing the norms and stuff like that. Um, Harry Potter, I haven't read it in forever, but for me, like that is my magic. I'm a Harry Potter girly for
I
sure.
hear it.
So
I know people have a complex relationship with Harry Potter now, especially because of J.K.
yeah,
Rowling and the LGBTQ stuff, LGBTQIA.
easily.
But I feel like she's the epitome of do you separate the art from the artist? I discussed this as well with Jay from Black Boys Read.
Hmm.
Um, he watches the movies because he owned the movies before he found out everything. So he already spent the money and it's not going towards her necessarily like with that
Right.
action. Um, I I kind of feel like that a little bit with like Percy Jackson, where like in the beginning Annabeth was white, and I didn't really think that much of it because I in the book I remember her being described a certain way, but when
Mhm.
the show recently came out, I saw that Annabeth was casted as a black, you know, character, and that made me really happy. But at the end of the day, for me, I just sit there and I'm like, you know what? People have like all this commentary about like what's right and what's wrong between the book community. Like it was written like this, it
Yeah.
can't be this way. But I feel like with fantasy, there should be room for like to expand your imagination. Like we have dragons and we have people who fight with water and fire and like
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
even Fourth Wing, like if that ever became a movie, even though I'm not a huge fan, but if that ever became a movie, I would
Hmm.
hope that we'd be down to see like characters of all shapes and sizes and colors and like I don't know, diverse
Yeah.
fantasy. I love to see
Yeah.
it. I
That
love-
reminds me of The Cruel Prince by Holly Black,
Mm.
because that was a situation where in their Fae world, everyone was different shapes and colors and textures that
Ooh.
the main character, Jude, for being human, essentially, is the weird one for being like what we consider normal. So I love stuff like that.
You bring up The Cruel Prince, and I have a coworker who's reading that book or has read that book recently. Um, I'm sitting here like low key, I don't think I can fight it anymore. Like I may end up reading it just because like I
Yeah.
know that it's enemies to lovers. I know that the love interest is not necessarily like, isn't he like secretly obsessed with her? Like, isn't there a
See,
notebook where
yeah.
he like
Oh
writes her
yeah.
name 1,000 times?
Yeah. But on
It's
the
giving.
outside presents like he hates her guts, and I was
Hmm.
not a fan of him for a while. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I did kind of spoil myself a little bit. I love spoilers, so I do enjoy content that also maybe
Fair.
spoils books that I don't think I necessarily would have read. So I watched an animated explanation of The Cruel Prince, which was very
Oh.
interesting. Someone
Yeah.
drew like stick figures and wrote out the story of like this is what happens to the Cruel Prince if you like, And I was watching it and I was like, wait a damn minute, this looks kind of good. This looks kind of good. I would still read the book, even though I know what happens, because you
Mhm.
get descriptions of the worlds and everything. Um, I watched Wicked again yesterday, and after walking out of Wicked, I had read the book in high school. It wasn't for me. I think I was very young and I couldn't really appreciate it. And there were certain things that happened that kind of like gave me the ick a little bit.
Mm.
But as I was walking out of the theater and everyone around me was crying and sniffling, my girlfriend was crying, I was like, I enjoyed the play. I'm full of emotions, but I'm not crying right
Yeah.
now. I'm walking
Yeah.
out of the theater and I was like, well, time to go home and read smut. Home sweet home. Like I'm sitting here and I'm like,
Ah.
like some people just like to wind down with a nice glass of wine and a little bit of smut on the side, a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of monster romance, if you will.
Yeah.
She's green. That's tame from where I come from. Like that's that's tame from where I come. You ever heard of a shadow daddy? Have you ever heard of a tentacle? And like, can I
I'm
interest you in a
yeah.
tentacle? You know, don't
Buffet
knock it till you
platter.
don't knock it till you try it.
I brought up the term shadow daddy at my one of my little side hustle gigs
Yes.
as a dance teacher, our staff party, and a girl across the table from me looks at me and goes, "What?" It's like, so a shadow daddy. He's exactly what
Mm-hmm.
he sounds like. You should
Absolutely.
meet one.
Pedro Pascal with wings in the dark.
He'd be
Picture it.
unstoppable.
Picture it. But that would be too powerful. We can't combine. We
Too
could,
powerful.
but
Yeah.
we could. What if we did? Um, but that's too powerful. Are you interested in two genres, if you will, romantasy and spice?
Yeah.
A Court of
Yeah.
Thorns and Roses is not the only romantasy and spicy book out there. Unpopular opinion. There's so many amazing fantasy romances out there that handle like mature content and also like women empowerment and like complex
Hmm.
relationships. We can always do an episode about that in the future, but
Yeah.
I feel like, ooh, there's so many series that kind of get slept on a little bit because
Hmm.
everyone gets super fixated on this like one series. And
Fair.
I'm like, dang, I'm pretty sure there's other series out there for folks who want to, dive
Yeah.
into romance even deeper.
Hmm.
But this episode, I really want to focus on your top 5 books of the year. I know this is very difficult because 2024 was like hella chaotic, but
Yeah.
I'm asking all my bookish friends about their top 5 books of the year, and I'm sharing them with each episode.
Hmm.
And I want to hear about the book, well, a little bit about what it's about, and then why you loved it so much. You do not have to
Absolutely.
rank them by number either. Like it doesn't have to be like this is number one and this is number two. Rank it however you like. But if you want to save number one for the end, in theory, you could. You could.
I will. I shall.
Oh, she said anticipation. I
I'm
will build the
prepared.
anticipation. Okay, yes, please share your books with us and the listeners.
Perfect. So after some intense deliberation, it took me a while earlier this morning to get everything prepared and in order. My number five was actually lent to me by my very lovely friend Audrey, and it is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. Um, it's not something I typically read. My friend is very much into more gothic horror, so she's been giving me a couple really great. She gives me a few books a year, and then beyond that, she'll have brilliant suggestions. And I'm like, I need to slow down. I'm gonna have nightmares. And basically, it is exactly what it is in the title. This
Mhm.
Southern book club, think kind of 1900s housewife situation, and they have a book club where they're reading all of these books. A guy comes into town. It is not what he seems. He's essentially conning everybody,
Mhm.
and The reason I chose it is because there were first, it preys on my worst fear as a woman, which is just being in a scenario where nobody believes you and thinks you
Mhm.
are crazy, and it is very stressful, and I want to get to a resolution in books like that because I think it's a solid thing for people to just be like, no, 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 like it couldn't be that, and I'd be like, okay, I guess, like I'd gaslight myself. Also, there is a particular scene in an attic that involves a bug, and I have never had such a visceral reaction to reading before, and I was shook. I did have to pause after that, because I am hypochondriac, and just imagine that turned my stomach. So that's all I'll say about that. Yeah.
I have read that book. I read that book the summer that I went to St. Augustine with my girlfriend. We went on a little road trip.
Oh yeah.
And you'd think like this is a romantic trip, sun shining, like oh, early relationship, whoa.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm gonna give Grady Hendrix a try because I remember he wrote a horror book about like IKEA. It's pretty much IKEA. And I've
Oh,
always wanted to read it.
yeah.
But I remember the introduction to that book, he did talk about how his mom was a big inspiration for the character in the book, the main character.
Mhm.
Just because he saw how much she sacrificed and he didn't understand the horrors of being a woman and the things that she gave up in her life in order to make like a home for him. And like the way he talked about that set the tone for why this character does certain things and also her sense of privilege. She
Yeah.
she doesn't I don't think the main character is aware of her privileges and kind of what she like from her point of view, what
Mhm.
fear feels like versus the point of view of a character of color in the book where something
Mhm.
bad happens to them pretty early on. Like they know something's going on. And she
Mhm.
like runs to their neighborhood or whatever. And long story short, she realizes that the way that the crime is being perceived in their neighborhood, the neighborhood with people of color versus the how the crime was perceived in her neighborhood was very
Mhm.
different. And the way they approach this monster, if you will, and the way the monster preys on a certain group of women
Mhm.
and then eventually becomes unfortunately more confident and he ends up going to her neighborhood. He really was a predator in every sense of the word, both supernaturally and like social. He was a predator. Which is terrifying. Like I understand exactly what you mean, the ultimate fear of like the monster is next door and
Mhm.
he's charming and no one believes you because he's so charming and like um I think Grady Hendrix in that book in a way wrote horror and fear and anxiety and like that claustrophobia of like the suburbs where like everyone's kind of the same and there's not a lot of room to be different and if you're suffering you have to do it in silence. um
Mhm.
it reminded me a lot of like Fright Night, the movie Fright Night, where it has a horrific. It's very 80s-esque. There was a
Mm.
remake
Mhm.
with Colin Firth, who, as a gay woman, I openly admit that man is fine as fuck. I did imagine him, the guy from Butcher and Blackbird. I did
Yeah.
imagine him as Butcher because of the accent and the hair, and he has to be kind of like fucked up in a way, like very
Mhm.
grizzled and like you could see the damage, but he's also incredibly successful and cleans up very well. I imagined Colin
Right.
Firth. But he also plays a paranormal character in Fright Night in the most recent
Mhm.
version. And he's supposed to be sexy and alluring and, you know, like you can tell something's off, but also like he's just so good looking. You don't really want to tell something's
Right.
off.
Right.
Terrifying. Like, I imagined him as the character in that book when I read that book as well.
Mhm.
Body horrors. I wasn't prepared for I guess the gore. I'd never read Grady Hendrix before, but oh
Yeah.
yeah, there's gore. If you're a horror girly out there and you want
Yeah.
body horror, you want claustrophobic scenes, you are okay with rats. If you're okay with rats,
Yeah.
then maybe that book is for
I
you. I'll
Yeah.
leave that there. If you're okay with
Yeah.
rats and gore and obviously the title gives away vampires, but not in like a sexy way, like vampires like
Yeah.
predators
Yeah.
and not in like a I can fix him. No, 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 no. You can't actually fix him. You
No.
can't. You
You
can't. And like and also women kind of banding together to resolve an issue even though
Yeah.
they have differences. there is a character in that book, if I remember correctly. She was heavily linked to like religion. I think she was like super religious or something like that. And
Yeah.
when she does have to do something to survive, she justifies it in a way.
Hmm.
And I found that fascinating. And finally, someone had referenced like, no, no, like if it's necessary to protect her children and to protect her family, she will do whatever it takes.
Hmm.
That was very interesting. Very much like Midnight Mass, the show on Netflix from the amazing director from Bly Manor. Um, religion is all about sacrifice and blood, and like it's all about like kind of the deep parts of ourselves beyond your bones and your spirit, and like the impact of group belief, you know what I mean? And like that power of that in what people are willing to
Hmm.
do to feel safe is
Hmm.
both beautiful and can be written in a horrific way if you want to explore that in the
Yeah.
beauty of fiction. And maybe in reality, who knows? So it's
Yeah.
I like how Grady Hendrix was not afraid to have a character who was morally torn but did what she had to do. Even though she's a side character, that character in particular really interested me. And the character
Hmm.
who, like, she knew everything. Like, she had all the connections. Like,
Yeah.
when certain
Yeah.
bad things happen, she's like, "Okay, I got you, girl. I know number for this. I know someone can clean your
Yeah.
carpet. I know a good friend, but also very like Martha Stewart-esque."
Mhm.
That's the kind of vibe she was
Yeah.
giving. Each
Yeah.
woman had a different vibe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it there were so many layers, like you said, as far
Mhm.
as race and then all the different women. And I think it brings in a good point of like everyone has a different tipping point to action. I know personally I would probably hold out until I'm like, everyone has a different motive for being like, okay, I'm going to like I have to actively do something now about this perceived problem or whatnot. So I think it's easy when we read books to be like, well, why didn't they do this? Or I would have done this. And it's like, but would you really?
I will say this. I did imagine Angela Bassett as the
Mm,
I don't mean to I'm not going to spoil it. There is a character who is very clear in the beginning that she feels like something was going on, but
hmm.
she didn't want to speak out because she knew how she was going to be perceived
Yeah.
as a woman of color. And she kind of pushes like this is important. You need to follow up. It's going to be on your front porch soon. Like if it's on me, it's going to come to you.
Mm.
And her resilience and her willingness to kind of do what it took. I imagined Angela Bassett because she had to have that like no, like it's coming for you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like it's on my side of town, it's coming to yours. Like
Hmm.
I was a little sad with that book, the only reason because she kind of her character I felt like kind of floated away in the end a little bit. He
Hmm.
didn't give us a like the closure he gave other characters for her.
Which I think carries the theme of discrimination in a
I
way.
could see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Hmm.
I tip my hat to you.
Thank you.
I
Thank
tip
you.
my hat to you. We go from smut to horror. I tip my hat to you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you.
yes, I definitely want to read more horror linked to like people of color on all cultures. I just think that there's something so scary about like we're all women, but even though we're all women, we're divided in so many ways by society, and we
Hmm.
seek togetherness even when it's dark and it's scary, and we have to bond together for to kind of conquer this monster that attacks all of us in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nobody's really safe. Like your
Hmm.
race, your age, your finances, like none of that matters when the monster's at the door. Like it does not matter.
Hmm.
That he kind of like in a horrible way, like he didn't really like he had a type, I guess, but I feel like the vampire in a way, he started with one group and then he kind of just, like he kind of went for
Hmm.
any female out there,
Hmm.
a very specific female person out there. But I just that made him even more horrible, and I just wanted
Yeah.
him to so he does get what he deserves.
I will agree.
He
I
does.
like
He
the
gets what he
resolution.
deserves.
Yeah.
But the description of what they end up doing to him,
It's intense.
wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I have yet to read a horror that's that creative. I think that's the word I'm going to use.
Yeah.
Creative. I'm going to
I
break it
like
down.
that.
Creative. Yes.
Creative.
I think the only other horror, if you liked that and you like short stories, I would highly recommend, and you want more diversity, Never Whistle at Night, which is an indigenous horror anthology. The
Oh.
audiobook is amazing. My first episode with a guest author was from that book. Mathilda Zeller, she's wonderful. And there's a short story in that book where it's about a creature or spirit that goes into the body of a frat boy and ends up trying to prey on a young woman he meets at a party, and it's the spirit encompassing the body of this boy. But he uses the fears and what this boy would be willing to do to a certain woman. He feeds off that. And he's like, it's very interesting where the monster begins and where the boy kind of
Mhm.
ends. And then as they hunt down this girl, you begin to realize she may or may not be aware and be prepared. It
Ooh,
is so good. It
yeah.
is so, so good. I loved it. It was short. It was good. You get from the monster's point of view. So when things do flip, it feels like you're trapped, but you are rooting for the women.
Hmm.
So, so good. So we love when the tables turn. We
Oh
love when
yeah.
the tables turn and
Oh
when we
yes.
survive.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So if that's your,
Yes.
is that your number five? Is that your number
That
four?
is my number five.
That's your number
Yeah.
five? Okay. So
Yep.
what is your number four?
Perfect. Moving on, number four is Lilith by Nikki Marmory. I had not heard of this book ever, and I picked it up when I went to a couple bookstores in New York. It just spoke to me right off the bat. It says something along the lines of like, we know Adam and Eve, but first there was Lilith.
Ooh.
And it is a historical fiction, which is also something that I don't know. Yeah, historical fiction. I had to run through the fiction nonfiction thing in my head, but it is not something that I read very often, and I absolutely loved the concept. Again, it just talks about the plight of a female in relation to kind of male energy, and as someone who is not religious. It starts all the way back at the beginning and kind of chronicles all the way through to like present day.
Mm.
And I think it's just a really brilliant take on religion, how we view gods, and kind of this um, unbalance of this like masculine dominating overtaking energy with this like feminine building, creating, birthing energy. And it stood out to me when I was looking at all the books that I had read this year.
Wow. That's really thought-provoking. The essence of creation is not like it's so complex. The idea of to create a soul, like to create a body, to create a person.
Hmm.
Um, our bodies can do amazing things, but it's also like that reminds me, you know what? If we had to like, I feel like there's a book that's a sister to that book, even though it's not
Hmm.
about Lilith. It is about power and it's about, it's a very short book and it's very good and it's a little dark. I wouldn't describe it as a horror, but it's definitely close. It's called Comfort Me with Apples.
Hmm.
And it is about a woman and she finds something in her house, her perfect house, and she thinks that her husband is keeping secrets from her. And it's linked to creation, power. Her husband doesn't actually have a name. She doesn't necessarily have a name. And she discusses why they are perfect for each other and the importance of maintaining that. And I'll leave it there, but it's very, very,
Okay.
very similar to what you're talking
Yeah.
about. And the way it turns and does have I don't know how to describe it. It does have a element of temptation and what does that even mean? It almost feels like a combination of Stepford Wives meets Coraline meets the Bible.
Oh, okay.
That's what it feels like. If I had to give it an
Wow.
example, it's like Coraline because it's very like uncanny valley. You can tell something's off
Yeah.
in this beautiful dark world.
Yeah.
It's like Stepford Wives because the way that she describes each wife in the neighborhood, Miss Fish, Miss Horse, Miss this, they're all named after animals, which is interesting. And it's like normal in the
Yes.
book. And all the women have like a certain style and they all kind of mirror each other, very like that most recent movie with Florence Pugh and Harry Styles.
Don't
Don't
worry,
Worry, Darling.
darling.
It is
Yeah.
very much like that. And then it has elements
Oh.
of the Bible because there is a sense of I was created for you, therefore you can uncreate me. and their
Mm,
power is very uneven. And
yeah.
there may or may not be a tooth that is found in a kitchen that does not belong to the wife, which leads you to
Oh,
believe whose tooth is this?
yeah. Hmm. That sounds right up my alley. I will be
It is
checking that
so
out.
good. I listened to the
100%.
audiobook and it was very short. The book is also very short. It is one of
Yeah.
the most haunting books and it does discuss like womanhood and our bodies and like what does that even like, like
Yeah.
what does power even really mean? And, like it
Yeah.
oh, so good.
That sounds good. That
And who you mentioned in your book may or may not be referenced in Comfort Me with Apples.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Good to know.
I don't know. It's not like horrific like Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. But
Yeah.
it does foreshadow horrific things
Mhm.
and the power that is invested in some people that does blind trusting loving women and yeah, it's so good. It's so good for anyone who's ever felt like misled or who's ever felt like you wanted to question someone and their immediate response was anger. This book you will relate to. And it is haunting. It is so good.
That does sound good. Yes.
I
Beautiful.
I love it. I love it. I love hearing books from other people and I love being able to find books that touch on similar things
Yeah.
because then
Yeah.
it's almost like we've swapped books. We swap things. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So,
Okay, so we have Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. We have
mm-hmm.
Lilith,
Mm-hmm.
different genres. We have
Mm-hmm.
a contemporary story with fantasy elements and suburbia and horror. We
Mm-hmm.
have a historical, somewhat story with religious
Mm-hmm.
connotations and women. Both
Mm-hmm.
books linked to women, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
You'll sense there's a theme.
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. McLovin. I love
Oh,
it. I'm
perfect.
vibing.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
I love it. I love it. If it's a corporation and it's a good book, I'll take it, I suppose. Barnes and Noble. Oh, I'm part of the machine.
Uh,
But
yeah.
yes, okay. So what is
Okay.
your third book?
Perfect. So moving on, number three, we got another genre, same theming though.
Ooh.
Women Who Run with Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. That is, I've mentioned it before.
Mhm.
I don't even know what you would categorize this as, but basically, she takes a bunch of stories, short stories, and really breaks down all of the symbolism of these stories, and it is they mostly relate to the wolf archetype for females, how wolves interact in the wild and how that tends to be different from human culture, obviously. So some stories around um, the most two of the most notable for me were one was around this idea of after I read this, I kept reading it absolutely everywhere, and I swear I had never heard of it before. But it was like something about Bluebeard or something. It's a common story out there to some degree that I had seen it a few more times, but basically how um, when you are um we're taught to be sweet, to be kind, to be nice, and that essentially just makes us victims, right? We don't have teeth. We are soft and thus easily overtaken. So he relating that to, wolves, you got to bite back, you got to grow some teeth, and being nice and kind will make you a target, um, which stood out to me. And as well as there was another story where basically a man was fishing and he pulls up a skeleton, scares him, he starts running. Obviously, the skeleton is still on the fishing rod. It's chasing him, and eventually he gets back to his house and he brings it in, and he decides for whatever reason to clean it off and give it love and respect, and it eventually turns into a woman. And it was a brilliant story that alludes to love, and that's been really relevant to me of like we're fishing out there in the world and it's gonna come up and pop up when we least expect it most of the time. You know, you're not fishing for a skeleton, but then it pops up and there's a moment in love as we're building those feelings of intimacy where you start to run from it, right? You start to question, oh, is this someone I want to spend the rest of my life with? You start getting all those doubts. You're running from the skeleton, but it's going to chase you. It's still coming. And that beautiful moment of it takes care and nurturing in a time where she did nothing but lay there. She was just a skeleton, and he took the time to clean her off and take care of her when she was at her most vulnerable. So, again, there's a lot of just really brilliant stories that have really beautiful symbolism, and she walks through them also. I think it's a great read for absolutely anyone.
Wow. I love
Yeah.
that metaphor of like she just laid there and he cared for her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. That
Hmm.
sounds so good. Like I have heard of the book and I think I have seen a rendition of the cover before.
Yeah.
I've never read it before and for lack of a better word, it feels like a big girl book. It feels like
Yeah.
a book that you read when like you're older and like you're mature. But
Yeah.
before you know it, you look up and you're you are an adult and you're navigating certain things and
Hmm.
books I feel like can bring that universal sense of like you're not alone in this feeling or you're not alone in this desire to feel
Hmm.
loved and to feel seen and to feel heard and
Hmm.
especially as you discover your power, or in some cases where you don't feel powerful.
Hmm.
There's something so powerful about finding books where it's other women saying, "Hey, I have also I've women, people, everyone saying, I have faced adversity. I have faced moments of doubt and anger and sadness and
Hmm.
maybe power imbalances and financial struggles or whatever. All of it, we've all faced this. You have a power inside of you. You have a natural inclination to survive.
Hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with choosing what is best for you. It's not selfish. People do it all the time.
Totally.
You
Yeah.
know, like you said, you have teeth like they're there
Hmm.
for a reason, you know?
Hmm.
Protect yourself,
Hmm.
survive. But
Yeah.
also find time to find a safe place to kind of lay your head and be vulnerable. And if you feel like it's the right time and you trust your gut, it's okay to follow that as well.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah. No,
complexity to that identity. It's so beautiful. What a
absolutely.
great choice.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and like relating it back to romantasy books in general, or even just like fantasy, I think it's such a brilliant way to kind of braid in all of these themes where, like, if I read some essay on why we need to be, more harsh or mean or whatever word you want to use, more assertive as women, um, it doesn't quite hit the same versus like a story where you're in this world and you're not a part of it. It's, we know it's fiction, but when you can be aware enough to draw those parallels, I think it's just a um, different way to frame things that can sometimes be more interesting or alluring, sometimes maybe less harsh than kind of being like, this is what your real world is right now.
I recently read something that actually made me feel exactly like that, like feel understood
Yeah.
and the romance of loving yourself, but also finding a way to love the world again, and then to be able to love another person. Like you said
Hmm.
with the skeleton, but also like with the wolf to be able to embrace who you are. While
Hmm.
also with the skeleton, you can't run from love. Like in some situations, like that love was meant for you, and being vulnerable is terrifying, and like that's
Hmm.
valid as well. In the book I was telling you about that I'm currently reading, um, I like to write quotes down and then share them on the podcast or share them on Goodreads when I do reviews. And there was a quote specifically that hit really, really hard. And um, there's it's about disability in love, but also just about the love in general, about how we appreciate it and like vulnerability. And the person says, it comes from the shared desire for a better world. It is not performative or draining. I weave just disabled love into my life like a practiced artisan. I weave line after line, springing into existence. I interlace my love I have for you, the love I have for me, and the love I have for us. Which, like, just the way she like links, like, it's the theory of like strings, like the string of your family,
Yeah.
friendship. It all kind of weaves together like a pattern. And
Mhm.
then I thought about it as like a quilt, like each patch of this person, they kind of gave you a
Yeah.
piece of themselves. Um, wow, like So, so good. Also, just like the love of a pet, the love of friends, like,
Hmm.
the love of the time you have with the ones you care about.
Hmm.
There's just so much vulnerability to that. It's in like, I just feel like as one learns to love, it's not always about what you receive, but also what you give.
Hmm.
Like books teach us so much, and like
Hmm.
what a gift to be able to appreciate it and articulate and like
Yeah,
soak in that knowledge.
absolutely.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, even like monster romances, if you will. People joke and like laugh about it, but I'm like, in a monster romance, the metaphor I always receive is to love someone despite how they look, to love them despite, I'm afraid to do this or I'm afraid to communicate. I want that. In a
Hmm.
monster romance, there's I've read the ones I have read and enjoyed, and the ones you've recommended, I have kind of dipped my toes into.
Hmm.
There's a certain level of acceptance
Hmm.
on both sides,
Yeah, yeah. And
and
like
like
we're
no
gonna figure it
judgment.
out. Yeah.
Love and also unpacking it. Like, why do you judge this group? Why
Hmm.
do you judge this person? Like, what makes you think that they can or cannot do a certain thing? Like, you're kind of
Yep.
bringing in your own prejudice. Let's unpack that,
Hmm.
and also
Absolutely.
respecting boundaries. It's okay not to want certain things. It's okay not to want certain people,
Hmm.
you know? Like, that's okay. Some tentacles
Yeah,
are not for some people, and that's okay. And that's okay.
absolutely.
Some of us
Absolutely.
want shadow daddies, and some of us want dragons. Some of us are wolves, and some of us prefer to be inside cats, and that's totally cool.
Yeah,
Totally,
absolutely.
you
Absolutely.
know? But yeah, oh, so
Yeah.
empowering. That book, like, I
Yeah.
cannot wait to read that. I feel like that's gonna be like an emotional, like, ginger shot. It's gonna like,
Hmm.
it's intense at first, but it's good for you, and like it makes you
Yeah. Oh
better.
yeah. And you're like, hang on.
Yeah. I love food metaphors. Like if I can connect it to somehow to like a food or a drink, I
Yeah.
absolutely will. Yes. So
Perfect.
okay,
Perfect.
cool. All right. So that is your number
Awesome.
three. So we have
Hmm.
the paranormal with Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires.
Hmm.
We have Lilith, which is that kind of history and
Hmm.
linking back to women. And then we had your third pick, which I don't want to say wrong. But what was the title of your third pick? I feel like I don't want to say Dancing. It's not Dancing with Wolves. It's not the movie.
That would be a great one. Women who run with wolves.
Women Who Run with Wolves. Yellowstone is on my mind. So that's why I'm sitting here and I'm like, help me. So
Yeah.
yes. Okay,
All
you said
good.
running with Women Who Run with Wolves.
Yeah.
That's so badass. I have no
Yeah. Yeah.
stamina, but the metaphor itself I'm vibing with.
Same here.
So
I don't want to run, but in spirit, I am running.
I jog with you. I jog with
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Okay, so that's your
Absolutely.
number three. What is your number two? We're getting
Perfect.
close. What's your number
We're
two?
getting there. Yep. Okay. So number two breaks the pattern slightly, but for good reason. Shifted by Danielle Cancel. This is one that I have talked about a few times before. This is a book that I arc read earlier in the year, and it has just stuck with me for two reasons. The first one that I've actually talked about in the podcast quite a bit was that it kind of breaks the typical theme, the typical pacing that I tend to see with spice, where, a lot of times it's either smut right off the bat and they have to continue building off of that, or there's a slow burn, but once you hit that same thing, there's always an upward trajectory, usually. This kind of breaks that uh commonality that I see in the sense that right off the bat, you're going to get three men, male and male and male, which was the first time I had ever read a scene like that, which is always exciting when you're like, ooh,
Wow.
a little first for me. Um, and then it turns into a slow burn. And
Mm.
I will say this is the only book that made it on my list that also has a male main character, which is always great. And the other reason that I really love it though is because the whole concept is that this is the a kind of traveling magic circus, and he has this ability to be able to shift, basically shapeshift, and he can look like anyone. And so one of the themes is that um even when he's sleeping with, everybody, usually people ask him to be someone else. Maybe it's an ex or someone they really
Mm.
admire, or someone they have a crush on. And obviously, that is not a fun feeling when everyone is asking you to be someone else. Um, and
Wow.
also the female that he's going after is a witch. So they both have magic and they are both, it's a dangerous situation to be in. This is a world where that is not accepted. I think like they're trying to capture them all.
Oh my
So
gosh.
high stakes, a lot going on, but it's really there was a brilliant dedication, and I wish I could because I arc read it, I would have to go back and find it, but just kind of the essence of it was for people who felt like they couldn't be themselves,
Mm,
and I think that is just a brilliant one of those. Top level, Magic Circus, yes. Deeper
wow.
level, what a beautiful and relatable theme that I think many of us can have felt at some point.
That sounds like such a good book. I'm like sitting here knowing that I'm gonna listen to this episode so I can add it to my own TBR for 2025.
Yeah.
Um, I I do relate to that though. Like when people say like I love their personality, but I'm not attracted to the person or whatever. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, but the person is their personality,
Hmm.
like the soul of the person, like good looks and all that aside, like what about the person in general? What makes you want to kiss and hug and hold their hand
Right.
and all the things? What about this person lights your fire so much besides
Hmm.
their looks, Um, and it's like good looks are great. My brain goes straight to Love is Blind. Good looks are great,
Right.
but also like what about the actual person? Do
Yeah.
I
The
like?
the essence is better though.
Yeah. And what a beautiful and creative concept of like
Hmm.
shifting and what that would be like to be able to transform into anyone. Like, do you love them for who they are, like their base, like what they look like on the like in every day, or do you want
Right.
them to transform into Timothy Chalamet or the guy from Twister?
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yes.
He was one of the first people I thought of. Or do you want Kristen Stewart, if you will? Like,
Mhm.
where does oneself go when you are transforming so often?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sense of
Oh,
self.
oh, and that's even a theme of it too. Like the more he has to be someone else, he starts to lose himself a little bit
Oh
because
my
it's
gosh.
yeah, yeah, right on the
The
mark
plot,
there.
the plot's already kind of getting me. I'm sitting here and
Hmm.
I'm like, and the book that I'm currently reading is like staring at me in the corner and I'm like, she doesn't see us. And I'm like, so tell me more
Shh,
about this book. I'll just,
it's okay.
like it can wait. It can wait.
Yeah.
I'm a mood reader, so sometimes like I'm not in the mood for a certain thing and then I stop and then I'll read
Hmm.
another book and be like, I love it. I love a contemporary romance. And then I'll be like, I kind of want a horror.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay,
Yep.
I'll read you too. Next thing I know, the book I was reading is like discarded in the corner. It's been a month.
Yeah.
So,
It's okay. It's okay.
yes.
She'll be
But
there
your books
waiting.
have been so good so far. Like, you
Thank
have
you.
so many different
Thank you.
genres as well that you're touching on.
Yeah.
You're so much better than me because if it was up to me, I'm kind of scared to admit my top five books of the year because, like, I feel like they're gonna kind of get stuck into like one specific genre. Um,
Well,
so
yeah. No, that's fair. To be fair, I think this year personally has been quite a like, we're going up. We're doing some deeper stuff. So I think that's
let's
where
do some
like some
deeper
of that
stuff.
extra has been sprinkled
Okay, we have
in.
to challenge ourselves as well, and smut can be deep, nonfiction can be deep, history can be deep, sci-fis can be deep. All these
Yeah,
genres have a certain level of deep.
it's usually pretty deep.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. They're giving it everything they've got.
Yeah, yeah.
The plot said, tap out when you're ready. My safe word is keep going. Oh my God, no. I don't remember what movie I saw that in. I think it must have been like Channing Tatum or something like that. But someone was like, I think it was something related to like a wax or something, and they were like, let me know when it hurts too much. The person was like, I've had so many of these in my life, like nothing hurts me now. Like I'm desensitized.
nothing.
And I'm sitting here and I'm as a person who's gotten one, I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh no, I am a super big softie.
Yeah.
So I'm especially when it comes to smut, I'm just sitting here and I'm like, nothing can surprise me, nothing. And then I'll read something and be like, oh, that's new. That's new. That is new. And I am okay with
Yep.
learning new
Yep.
things. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. We're in an era of new genres and new microtropes, which I've recently learned that term as well. Like
Yes.
tropes, like if you have grumpy sunshine,
Mhm.
microtropes would be, from what I understand, it's like farmer apple orchard. It's like a
Super
very
specific.
specific,
Yeah.
yeah, like, podcast, masked man,
Mhm.
it's very specific, like tropical getaway one
Yeah.
time, things like that. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is a very specific trope, but I'm cool.
Wet t-shirt. You're like,
Yeah, it's
okay.
very specific, like small town, like international, like so it's not in the US, it's like somewhere else. I'm like, okay, that's cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Or like what is it?
Love it.
Guaranteed happy ending. There's a term where it's something like that, where like there will
Yeah.
always be a happy ending and people know that going in,
Okay. Okay. I
which
see. I
I
see.
get it.
Yeah.
I've been traumatized, pen pal. I've been told that one thing was gonna happen, and that's actually
Right.
not what happened. So, Divergent, Hunger Games. I mean, there are certain things you go in and you feel like you're safe, and then you
Right.
realize you're not. So
No.
it's okay. I'm trying to like I'm excited for what your number one is, but at the same time, I'm like, do I know what your number one is? So I want to know what is it?
Yeah. No one is surprised that my number one. Oh, I'm gonna cheat at first, and then I'll give you a more specific answer. So I'm gonna choose the whole Souls trilogy by Harley LaRue. I
I
couldn't
knew
stop
it.
talking about it. If I had to get specific, I will say the very last one, Soul of a Witch, was my favorite. It's just nice to have that bow on top, the culmination of everything. But, if you've listened to like any of my podcast episodes in the past few months, I had specific episodes that cover each of the books and then just zooming out. And in general, I think it is great. We have demon men with human slash witch women. They're
Mm,
all different. Um, and well, two human women and then a witch at the end. But um and each couple just has a different feel, a different energy. One of them is like a badass, kill them all. The other is just like happy-go-lucky, you're surprised she's alive. And then another that is like more timid and kind of gains her strength and her confidence throughout the book. So again, beautiful women leads that all have different life experiences and different choices. And also, on top of that, the smut is just beautiful. We got pegging, there
mm,
is rope play, there
yeah.
is knife play,
Ooh,
all the things. Like I said, it's literally like a buffet of new experiences.
ooh.
And again, seeing how each of the women respond to that is beautiful. And like the demons, they're like, we play these games, but it is about consent. Like, this is not fun if you don't want to do this. And I think that's like an aspect that sometimes we miss, It is fun to like be told what to do and maybe to be forced to certain levels. And I think that that was really beautiful that that was one of their like tenets is, yeah, we want you to want this.
I love how like smut and spicy books, call it what you will. I've labeled it on the podcast as like extra hot cappuccinos. Like it
Yeah.
appears subtle on the outside, and there may be
Yeah.
a plot, but we all know what we're here for. And like I'm sitting here, we also like the sweet ones, like a nice hot mocha where it's sweet and the
Mhm.
spice and like it's great. Um, Choose whatever flavor and spicy level that you want, or maybe even no spice. But there is something to be said for when you read a book and like you meet the female main character, the male, any love interest, you meet the main character and then you meet who they may end up with.
Mhm.
And there's something about the journey there. And then when they do sleep together, when they do explore certain things that they like, or they're introduced to certain things, you as the reader may also be introduced to that thing and unlock something in yourself, but even just maybe unlock a fantasy or how this makes you feel, or maybe an ick, like you discover something. And I really want to read this series now because it kind of sounds like a series it's not the same series, but it sounds like a series I read in high school. I don't remember what the series was called. For listeners out there, if you can find this series, I tip my hat to you, my smutty cowboy hat. If you can find this series, send it my way, put it in the comments, Instagram, DM me, do what you will. Um, but it was about three friends. Beware, I was in high school in like 2018. So it's like this is a while ago. This is not the same series. But there
Yeah.
was it was about three friends and it was a pack of wolves. It was three human girls, a pack of wolves, and one of the wolf, it was like Romanian wolf pack, and they're I think they were like finishing high school, going into college, and the girl in the first book, she ends up meeting this guy. He moved in next door. And one thing leads to another. He was kind of trying to find himself before he went back to his pack. And he comes from a royal pack. And he ends up realizing that she's his mate. And once you realize that the other person is your mate, whether they realize it or not, they begin to get like tattoos. Tattoos begin to form. So she's
Oh.
like sunbathing, and all of a sudden she's like, God, it's like really hot out here. Like it's burning. And she goes into the bathroom. She's like, what is that? And it's this like massive tattoo that's like forming on her body. And then when you bond with your mate in this like, it's a ceremony, they wash your
Hmm.
feet. There's a little bit of blood that is like combined. It's in a way like a marriage. Um, you also become to some extent a wolf as well, and your life is bound to theirs. So if they die, you die, and vice
Oh.
versa. So,
Yeah.
when like there's a scene where his parents get poisoned and they both collapse because they're tied to each other.
Oh.
So if
Yeah.
one gets horribly sick, like they both get horribly sick, which
Yeah.
I was like, ugh, cringe. But then when you really think about it, there's also a connection, which I later found in A Court of Thorns and Roses between a certain couple. But this is not my first time reading about that. In this
Yeah.
connection, it was almost like a phone call. Like
Hmm.
you could hear if
Hmm.
your mate was like running and they were like panting, you could hear the panting from miles away if
Hmm.
the bond was fresh, but the longer you were together, the more clear the call would become in a way.
Hmm. Yeah.
And if they were angry with you or resented you, they could almost hang up the call. It was painful, which was very interesting. Long story short, there's a character in the third book she wants who she wants, and she cannot have him, and he wants her
Hmm.
as well, but there's reasons he cannot be with her,
Yeah.
and he's been kind of holding back, and people want her. She's very like badass. She's like, you can't tell me what to do. And he's like the beta, and he's a lot more seasoned, and he's like, I don't have time to play with you. Like, I don't have time for this. Something really bad happens, and she has feelings for him, but there's no tattoo, there's no bond, there's nothing to say that they're mated, and she knows if
Mm.
they're not mated, he'll end up with someone else, and she can't do anything about that. She has to respect that. And it's painful. And she's like the sassiest one in the group. She's like, I don't fucking care. But she really does. And then she gets attacked. And as she gets thrown off a cliff, she hears him screaming. Like
Oh my
from a distance,
gosh.
he realizes something's wrong. And he's like,
Yeah.
she's not answering her phone. She's pissed off with me. I get it, but she needs to answer her phone. And she's like, I don't belong to you. One thing they
Yeah.
fight, something bad happens. She gets thrown off a cliff, and it's like a soap opera. She gets thrown off a cliff, and then she hears him like screaming, like out of rage, like, where are you? And he's stressed out and he's nervous. And she thinks like he must be miles away, like his wolfy powers, but it's their bond. And it snaps when she's like super scared. And it's only when she's at the bottom of the cliff she interacts with a very ancient witch who's been in hiding, who everyone thought was dead, but is very much alive. And she's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'll help you. And then the book ends. And it was like, and she's the third girl in the group. Everything was good. And then she's
Yeah.
like, he's not mine. I can't do this. And he's fighting her. He's like, just come back inside. And she's like, no, I'm not playing with
Yeah.
you. She runs away at a really bad time.
Ugh.
And then he realizes like they were mated, and he's like, and he can't find her.
Yeah.
And also the scent. Now a lot of other males want, oh, it was so good. And he was like
Whoa.
trying to find her. And she was like, I want to be found, but also I may not be with, I don't know, maybe we're not mated.
Yeah. That sounds good. I wanted to know it so bad, and then I realized like,
If I can find it,
2018 is when I graduated college, and that was not a time I was doing much reading in my life.
it's okay.
Yeah.
I was afraid to like, I was like, ah. Sometimes I think about how like time flies in that way. Like some books that I read, also the covers are very cheesy. These are not like super like cutie books. I remember the covers
Yeah.
were like, I was grateful I was reading it on a Kindle because the covers were not cute, but the
Fair.
plot was fantastic.
Yeah. That sounds good.
If anyone knows the series, please send me a message because I
Please.
remember the
Yeah.
story, but
Yeah.
I do not remember the title. I would reread it.
Yeah.
But dude, so good. Each book was a different friend. And then I think there was going to be another book in the series where it was about the friend who knew she was a witch and like her power was good at like helping people and like
Hmm.
healing people. And she ends up kind of possibly alluding to her being with like the player of the pack kind of group
Yeah.
situation. Like he was very like
Ah,
blasé about things, and he was
yeah.
also I think a shifter. But she was more the caring one, like her willingness to sacrifice for everyone, and her
Hmm.
power reflects that sacrifice, and it comes at a cost, and she doesn't really care.
Hmm.
Oh, it was so good. It was so, so good. So, yeah. I
Amazing.
love your top five books. I feel like
Yeah.
every single one of your books hit something emotional, and it definitely links back to like identity and love and like just like I just love it. I love all your book picks. Oh my
Thank
God.
you.
And you were smart for picking a series. You don't think I see you. You were smart for picking a series. You're like,
Thank you.
mm, it's a series, but also like this one particular book, but also like I love the whole series.
But yeah, we'll just
I kind of want
slide
to
that
read
in
them
there.
now. Like you discuss them so with so much love, and I'm
Thank
like,
you.
I might
Yeah.
just I might just listen. I've been avoiding those episodes on your podcast because I don't want to be spoiled, but also I'm
Yes,
like, I
yeah.
need more episodes. So the temptation is strong.
There you go.
For all listeners, I cannot recommend enough that you listen to her amazing
Thank you.
podcast. Busy Reading Romantasy is fun, it's sexy, it's comforting. After a long busy day at work, I promise you, like this is like it's like a warm cup of soup. It's wonderful. It'll soothe your
Thank you.
soul. It'll soothe you. Some fresh bread. Who doesn't like a good carb? That is
Hmm.
exactly what your
Hmm.
podcast it gives like the coziest, like you're in a cottage, you're wearing a cute corset, you're not expecting
Hmm.
anyone, and the next thing you know, Pedro, what are you doing here? What are you doing here, Pedro? And then you just hear, a beautiful narrator in the distance, like, and
Yeah.
this is when she realized she was in a fantasy book, a romance fantasy book. That is your podcast.
It's just been
Immediately, that's what it feels like.
all my hopes and dreams rolled into
The
one.
best.
Give me
You're in
the
a
cottage,
forest.
Noah.
It's a sexy forest. You're in a forest, but it's not hot or scary. Yes.
Right. Just
That
living
is
my
what your
best
podcast
life.
gives.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, where can everyone find you? I will link her on my Instagram, and I will 100% link your Instagram and your Spotify and your YouTube in the story,
Thank you.
right in
Thank
the
you.
show notes. But yeah, tell everyone where they can find you.
Absolutely. So my podcast is on YouTube, Busy Reading Romantasy, as well as Spotify, and they are video podcasts as well, so you can watch them. And then I am on Instagram, also at Busy Reading Romantasy. TikTok is the only funky one because that was taken, so there's just a period in between Busy Reading Romantasy between each word. So yeah.
I'm so, so grateful for your time. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And for everyone, like I said, definitely check out her podcast. She's wonderful. And I hope that I can see you again in 2025.
Oh, absolutely. We have
Awesome.
every time we have like three more ideas of what we need to film. So
We
appreciate it
definitely
as
do. We're
always.
on
It's
an
always,
odyssey. We're on a
yes,
bookish odyssey, okay? We got
yes.
spice, we got horror, we got history, we got
Hmm.
spooky,
All the things.
everything. We have emotional books. We have all the things. So we are on like a fun, like bookish odyssey. So yeah.
I
We
love
should do
that.
like an episode for each season, like winter, summer, fall.
Yes.
That'd be
Yeah,
cute. Oh
that would be
my God.
good. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm excited for all people who are listening now. The episode that we did earlier together about spice and smut and all the things should be out on her podcast
Hmm.
for Busy
Hmm.
Reading Romantasy. You should totally like check it out because it's so, so
Oh
good.
yeah. Oh yeah.
It's
It's
so,
my
so good.
last
I mean,
episode of the
yeah, you'll get the
year.
original visuals, the description of us diving into the darkness, if you will.
Yes. Oh
So,
yeah.
yes.
Absolutely.
But thank you for everyone who listened, and I hope you have a wonderful night or day. Okay.